Hello again. In this video I'm going to run through the solution to the Swahili problem, which is actually one that I wrote myself. Some of you perhaps wonder if the people who set these problems can speak all these languages that we set problems in, and sometimes we can, but mostly we get the information from a grammar book or a book like this, and then we use the interesting stuff that we find in there to make little problems for you. So this problem involves matching up Swahili with English translations, but notice that this time it's not what we call a chaos and order problem. The translations are actually matched up one-to-one with the Swahili sentences. So it's not a matter of finding which sentence is which. Rather, you have to look inside, look at the words in the sentences and figure out what's going on and what the grammar is. So where to start with something like this? Well, a good way to start is to look through the English, which you're familiar with, and see if you can find words that repeat. So ideally what you want to do is to find a pair of sentences which share just one word, and if all the other words are different, then what you'd expect is in the Swahili the two sentences paired with those English sentences will also just have one word in common. And that's the case here, where you can see, I hope you can see the cursor here, these two sentences have children but no other words in common. Remember, the blurb said that the words for the and a aren't translated. So these two sentences just have the words children in common, and sure enough, the Swahili equivalents just have one word in common, watoto. So now already you know that the Swahili for children is watoto, and then you notice that somewhere else later we have the word child. So let's have a look at the translations there. Child here is mtoto. So mtoto and watoto presumably are the singular and plural of the word for child, children. What we notice immediately is that the two words have toto in common, but they differ in that wa seems to indicate the plural and seems to indicate the singular. And if we repeat the process for another pair of sentences, we find the same is true for man and men. Man is mtu, men is watu. And again, if we repeat the process, we can find kings is wafalme, king is mfalme. So it looks like the prefixes are changing based on singular and plural. If we follow that through by pairing up some more sentences, we find that something else is going on. So if we find spoons, vijiko, but spoon, kijiko. So it's not wa and m. And if we find umbrella, and actually umbrella occurs in three sentences, umbrellas is miwavuli, umbrella is mwavuli. So what seems to be the case is that our rule that we've at first thought that was singular, wa is plural, doesn't seem to apply to all the words. And in particular, umbrella is a bit tricky because wavuli is singular, but it's not wawavuli, it's miwavuli. So the word pairs don't all have the same prefixes for singular and plural. Okay, let's put what we've found so far into a nice clear table. And what we discover is that Swahili has numerous noun classes, although in this problem we see only 3 of them, and we've labelled them 1, 2 and 3. And you can see that man, child and king seem to have the same sets of prefixes, and wa. River, umbrella and back bag have for singular but mi for plural. And then there's a third class, island, spoon and potato, which have ki for singular and vi for plural. So we can summarize that in this table here on the right, just taking away the stems, tu, toto, falme, and so on, and just list the prefixes for each noun class. Now, if we look a bit further, now we've dealt with all the nouns, we can look a bit further and look at the adjectives first. And by the same process of matching up with the translations, we can put them in a table, and we notice that the adjectives also have prefixes depending on whether it's singular and plural. But unlike the nouns, they also have different prefixes depending on which noun they're attached to. And we call this agreement, and you're probably familiar with this idea if you studied French or German and quite a few other European languages. So what we see now is that the adjectives don't just have a singular and plural form, they have 6 different forms depending on which class of noun they're attached to. And then if we look at the verbs, we see that the verbs also agree. If you look back at the sentences, you'll see that they agree with the subject. But again, they have prefixes, not exactly the same prefixes, but they do have a different set of prefixes depending on what the subject of the sentence is. So we have, as we can see, agreement between nouns, adjectives and verbs in the form of prefixes to the roots, which we can summarize as follows. So we have the class 1, class 2 and class 3 roots, 3 nouns in each group. We've got the adjective roots, and for each word there's presumably 6 different forms. And we have just 2 verbs, have and be enough, and they also have a system of prefixes. And as a further generalization, we can notice, and this will simplify things a little bit, that the prefixes for the adjectives are actually the same as the prefixes for the nouns. Not quite the same story with the verbs. We have and a here. We do have some similarities, but it's not systematic. So now we can make the translations. There's 6 sentences, and the sentences have, in some cases, word forms that we've already seen, but in other cases, word forms that we have to construct using our rules. And also, I forgot to mention, one thing we'll have noticed when we were analysing the sentences is that the word order is slightly different from English. The adjective follows the noun. So now you can see that we simply apply the rules, and so for example, small children, we know that watoto is children, small is dogo with the prefix for plural of children, wadogo. Good spoons, vigiko, vizuri. I'm not going to go through all 6 sentences, but I think you can see we've simply applied the rules that we discovered. Now, to finish off the problem, it asked you if the singular word for prince is mkuu, what's the word for princes? And the answer to this is wakuu. Why is that? Well, because we know how to form the plural as long as we know which class the word belongs to. Because the singular starts with mkuu, prince is either class 1 or class 2. It can't be class 3 because that would be viku. Now the nouns in class 1 are all humans. I think if we remember there was man and child and king. So we can guess that prince is probably in this class too. You could also note that the words for man and child are in the same class, so king and prince probably will be too. So if the word for prince is in class 1, then the plural is wakuu. And in either case, the prefix for class 1 plurals is wa, so the plural of prince is wakuu. One thing to notice is that this is only highly probable, not definite. From the evidence we're given, Prince could be class 2. So we can't say for sure that Prince is class 1, but we can present our reasons for thinking it probably is, namely that it's human and is related to the word for king. So for absolutely full marks in your explanation, if you mentioned that you're not certain that it's class 1, but just assume that it's class 1 for the reasons given. And that's the Swahili problem. I think it's a typical problem that looks quite daunting at first, but if you set about it methodically, you'll get to the answer. Thanks for watching.